everyone, this is Celine from Blue Calla Patterns, and this is video 2 for the Honeysuckle Hobo bag. There are a lot of different parts to making this bag, so I'm actually going to separate it into smaller videos. In this video, we're going to be preparing the front and the back exterior panels. So looking at our bag, we're going to make this front panel with the zipper pocket, and then we're going to make this back panel as well. What you'll need are your 2 exterior upper panel pieces, and if you've completed the previous video, you should have your fusible woven interfacing and then your fusible fleece on the back, fused to the back of each piece, the wrong side. You'll also need your exterior lower panel B pieces, and you should have one piece where the fleece was trimmed away before fusing, and then this one just has fleece on the entire piece. You'll also need the exterior zipper facing piece, and you'll also need your pattern piece for this video, so make sure you have your pattern piece close by. You'll need your 9-inch zipper, or if you're using zipper tape like me, your 11, I think it's 11 or 12 inches. I actually cut 12 inches, so there's 12 inches of zipper tape, but if you just have 11 inches, that will be fine. And then your 2 exterior zipper pocket lining pieces. So what we will do to start, I'm just going to set all these pieces aside. I want you to get your exterior zipper facing piece, the matching pattern piece, and the exterior lower panel B piece that has the cutout in the fleece. So I've already done this part, but what you'll want to do is on the wrong side of your facing piece, use the pattern piece as a guide and draw out that curved shape that is in your pattern piece. So if you haven't done that yet, you'll want to cut out this piece, and then you just place it on the wrong side and draw out the shape. When that is done, you'll take this exterior lower panel piece and you'll place your facing piece so that it is right sides together, and you want 1/2 inch of space here between the top right hand corner of the exterior lower panel and the top right corner of the zipper facing piece. And you'll pin this in place. Now if you feel through, you should see how the shape on this piece matches the cutout in the fleece on the exterior lower panel. If it isn't, you'll want to adjust the positioning. Now I'm going to go over to my machine and I'm going to sew these together. So you can start at either end here, but backstitch and then sew along this shape and go slowly around the curve so that you have a nice curved corner here for your zipper opening. And then when you get to the other corner, make sure that you backstitch. So I'm going to go to my machine and do that now. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I've sewn along this this line that we drew, this shape. I'm just going to remove my pins. And then we're going to trim away a bit at the opening. So get a good pair of sharp scissors, and we're just going to trim away the seam allowance here. We're going to leave about 1/4 inch. Okay. And then as well, along these curved corners, we have to clip the seam allowance so that when we turn this wrong sides together, that the curve is nice and rounded. If you don't clip the seam allowance, your curves aren't going to look very nice. So I'm very carefully clipping this seam allowance, but make sure you don't go too far and cut your stitching. Okay, so I'm going to set up my ironing board, and then I'll show you how to flip this and press the seam allowance. Okay, so I'm now going to flip this facing piece towards the wrong side, and I kind of dampen my fingertips and I roll the seam in between my fingers to sort of finger press it before I use my iron to actually press it. Now, it takes a bit of time, but I really take my time here because I want my seam allowance to look really nice. Okay, and then I'll do that from the right side and the wrong side of the exterior lower panel, just to make sure it's nice and flat. Okay, so this is ready now. I'm going to set it aside temporarily, and I'm going to attach my zipper pocket lining pieces to my zipper. Now you'll need your 9-inch zipper or the zipper tape and your exterior zipper pocket lining pieces. For now, take one of the lining pieces. Make sure that if it's a directional print, that it's facing this way is up. Take your zipper and place it along the top edge. Both should be right side facing up, and you want your zipper pull to be on the right. Okay, so I'm just going to, you can pin, clip, whatever you prefer, along the top edge. And then I'm going to go over to my machine and I'm going to sew these together with 1/4 inch seam allowance along this top edge. Okay, so I've sewn the zipper to the top edge. Now, one thing I should mention is if you're using a prepared zipper, you'll just want to make sure that it's centered, horizontally it's centered along the top edge. Okay, so I'm just going to flip this, and I'm going to press my zipper pocket lining piece away from the zipper. Pull my zipper pull out of the way. Okay. So this is what it should look like. Your zipper pocket lining piece is wrong side facing up, and your zipper is right side facing up. Now take your remaining zipper pocket lining piece, and again place it so if it's a directional print that it's facing up, and pin or clip your zipper along the top edge of that piece. Okay, and then do the same thing as you just did and sew them together along the top edge with 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so now the zipper is sewn to the second piece, and you're going to do exactly the same thing, and you're going to press the seam allowance towards the zipper pocket lining piece. Okay, so if you're looking at it from the zipper's wrong side, your lining pieces should be right side facing up. And if you're looking at the zipper right side, these pieces are wrong side facing up. So now we're going to take the exterior lower panel with the zipper opening, and we're going to place it over top. Now you might have to adjust the position of your zipper pull so that it's out of the way. And what I do is I match up the edges of the facing piece with the edges of the zipper pocket lining pieces on both sides like this. Okay, and then I'll pin that in place. So again, just move your zipper pull out of the way. Now the top edge of this panel should be aligned with this top edge of your zipper tape. Okay, so I'm just going to pin through all the layers. Make sure that your zipper pull isn't in the way when you sew this next step. So just make sure that it's pushed out of the way. Just gonna pin along the bottom edge here. Unfortunately, the pad of my ironing mat is in the way, so I'm gonna just pull this over. Okay, so now there's two things you're going to do when you go over to your sewing machine. Next, you're going to start by top stitching along this curved edge, and while you're top stitching this, you're actually going to be sewing the zipper and the lining piece to this exterior lower panel. And then I just want you to do a quick basting stitch just here along the top edge of the zipper inside the opening only, just to kind of keep this lining piece away from the zipper teeth. So you're top stitching along this bottom edge, and then you're base stitching along this top edge of the zipper. And here, when you're doing this basting stitch, you can just use 1/8 of an inch seam allowance when you do this. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and sew this in place. All right, so I top stitched and then base stitched along the top. Just going to remove my pins. And now what you're going to do is flip all of this over. Okay, and what you will do is take this top edge and fold it down. Now it isn't going to meet the bottom edge of this piece perfectly. There's going to be a gap of about 1 inch. So first I'm just going to put a pin along the bottom here. Now you'll see there's a bit of a fold here at the top. That's okay. I want that fold to be there. So I'm just putting 2 pins. I'm going to move my zipper pull so it's facing down. And I'm just going to press this upwards like so. Okay, I should have done that on my ironing mat. That's all right. Okay. Now I am just going to finish pinning these together. Now, don't pin them to the lower panel. Just pin these pieces together. And when you pin at the top here, you can include the facing piece, because you're going to sew the facing piece to the lining pieces. Okay, so now you're going to go over to your machine and you're going to sew up the sides. You don't have to worry about the bottom edge because we're going to sew that up in the next step. So for now, all you're going to do is go over to your machine. I actually like to do it this way, facing up, and you're going to sew from the the bottom edge all the way to the top edge. Make sure you backstitch here at the top, and then do the same on this side. Flip this out of the way, and then you're going to sew along this edge and make sure you backstitch at the top. Okay, so I've sewn up the sides here. If you wish, you can trim away a little bit here. You can leave this side because it won't be in the way really, but if you want, you can trim away just a bit here on this side. Now, if you're trimming zipper tape, don't forget to melt it or seal it somehow so your zipper doesn't come undone. I actually just use a lighter and I melt any zipper tape that I cut when I cut the ends. I just make sure I peel away the fabric out of the way. Make sure your fabric doesn't catch on fire. Okay. Okay, so now flip this over, and I'm just going to give it a little press. Now you're going to go over to your machine and you're going to sew along this bottom curved edge through all of the layers, and that will actually sew up the bottom of your zipper pocket. And then we'll trim away whatever's the excess zipper pocket lining pieces. Okay, so I've sewn the bottom. I used 1/4 inch seam allowance along the bottom because I wanted to make sure that I caught this back lining piece. So now, following the curve of your exterior lower panel, you can go ahead and trim away the excess. Okay. And now your zipper pocket is complete. Okay. So now I'm just going to, actually I'll leave this here because we're going to need to press. So now take one of your the exterior upper panels, and you're going to place it so that the bottom edge of this panel is aligned with the top edge of the lower panel, and you're pinning them or clipping them right sides together, and then you will sew them together along the top edge with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So that's the reason why we're using the number 5 or 4.5 zipper tape, is because we want to be able to use a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance when we're sewing this part. Okay, so I'm going to go over to my machine and sew this together, 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. You're going to want to backstitch at the beginning and the end, and when you get close to your zipper pull, just move it out of the way so you have a nice straight line of stitching that isn't interrupted by the zipper pull. Okay, so these are sewn together now. All you have to do is flip the upper panel so that it's facing away from the lower panel. And then you're pressing the seam allowance towards the top, so away from the zipper. Just going to move my pull out of the way. Okay, and now I'm going to go over to my machine, and I'm actually going to top stitch the seam allowance, and you're only going to be top stitching like this seam allowance, the bottom edge of this exterior upper panel here. Okay, so I'm not sure if you can see, but I've top stitched here along it's the bottom edge here of the upper panel. So now we're going to just assemble these two pieces. You're not installing a zipper here, so you're just going to pin these together, same as you just did for the front. And once again, you're just going to sew these together with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance along this top edge. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. All right, these are now sewn together, and this time I'm going to do it a little bit differently for top stitching. What I actually do is press the seam allowance open. Trying to do this on a tiny mat. Okay. Now I press the seam allowance open from the back, and then I flip it over, and I do the same for the front. Okay, and then I'm going to go over to my machine, and this time when I'm top stitching, I will top stitch along both sides of this seam with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, I'm not sure if you can see it, but I've top stitched along both sides here. Now, before we end this video, all we're going to do now is fold these panels in half. Now, I think in the pattern I say to do this a bit later, but while I have these panels completed in front of me, I am going to do this right now. So you just fold them in half, right sides together, vertically in half, and mark the centers at this top curved edge and the bottom curved edge. Okay, and do the same for this panel, and then you can set them both aside, and we'll continue to the next video.